After spending 15 years in prison, a Jefferson Parish man is free.
John Thompson was exonerated in 2003.
He was sentenced to 120 years in prison, but right now has been exonerated.
Justice today for a man wrongfully convicted of a Brooklyn murder 50 years ago.
The exonerated Susan Mellon.
What was life like in prison for you, Susan?
It was frightening.
Tonight, a woman exonerated of murder will spend her first night at home in 17 years.
Deborah Brown left prison today.
Deborah Brown was a woman living in Cache Valley, Logan, Utah. She worked for a gentleman named Lael Brown. She was a single mom of 3 kids. Mr. Brown was found shot to death in his home.
And I was the one that found Lael, and I was the one that called 911.
She had also unfortunately forged some checks from his checking account, and because of that, the police really focused on her as the only possible suspect in his murder. Deborah Brown's case was originally charged as a death penalty case. At some point, the prosecutor decided to go forward simply with it being a life imprisonment case, and she was ultimately sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. Her lawyer was very confident that she wouldn't be convicted, but unfortunately the jury, when they learned that she had done this forgery, also believed that she did the murder to cover it up, and she was ultimately convicted of first-degree murder.
It's like everything went cotton candy fuzzy around me. Driving to the point itself and seeing all these gates open up, yeah, then it starts setting in. This is for real. I am never, ever gonna get out of here.
When we're talking about death as the sentence that is imposed, something that cannot be undone if we discover after the fact that there might have been a mistake, that's something that I personally am not comfortable with, knowing that we see these mistakes throughout our justice system all the time.
I think Deb was in a little bit of disbelief. I think she was a person who believed in the justice system, who believed that the justice system got it right, and who believed that if you went to prison, you were guilty. Deborah came to us, the Rocky Mountain Innocence Center, in about 2002 from a referral from a volunteer who had worked with her at the jail where she was housed. We met with her and became immediately convinced that we were dealing with an innocent person.
For every time that they should have probably let my case go by the wayside, they didn't. They'd come up with another idea or another avenue.
Her case was wholly circumstantial. We looked at all of the circumstantial evidence in that case, and we were able to show that none of those circumstances were true, and that really, circumstantially, anyone could be as guilty as Deborah Brown was. But on top of that, we were able to show that Deb had an alibi for the entire weekend when the murder occurred. That process from beginning to end took 11 years, and ultimately in 2013, the Utah Supreme Court affirmed the finding of innocence, and Deborah went home as a free woman. There's really no words to describe what it's like to tell someone that they're finally going to get to go home.
I get this call on the PA that I have visitors. It's not a visiting day, so I knew it was a legal visit. I go walking over there, and Jincy and Alan and one of the other attorneys was there, and I don't think Alan could help himself. He goes, "We won!"
And the day we brought her home, we took her to where her family was waiting. Her 3 children, who were 11, 12, and 18 when she went to prison, who are now grown with children of their own, and all of her grandchildren were there.
Gosh, overwhelmed right now. So blessed, so lucky, so happy.
Friends had put out a whole long thing of red carpet. My brother had bought this cold bike for me. There were yellow roses in the basket of it. There was yellow balloons to be let off. It was a gorgeous day.
There was never a more joyful moment that I've ever seen, that I've ever witnessed, and certainly that I've witnessed in my legal career.
There have been 1,400 people executed in the United States since the death penalty was restored in the 1970s. There have been 156 who have been exonerated. That means for every 9 executions. There's an innocent person who's been sent to death row that we know about. If 156 people were wrongly sent to death row, and 156 people could have been wrongly executed, can we trust the government to get this right?
This process is qualitatively different than any other kind of case. More attorneys are required. The state devotes more resources to these cases. Once the decision to impose death has been made, the state throws huge amounts of resources and people to try the case. In response, the defense tries to muster up all their resources.
And when you look at the death penalty to see whether it's cost effective, it has 2 problems. One is it costs more than all the other alternatives, and it's not effective. It is not a deterrent. The single most likely outcome of a capital case once someone gets sentenced to death is not that he or she is executed, it's that the conviction or death sentence is going to be overturned. You would think that if we're a deterrent, homicide rates would drop more in states that had the death penalty than in states that didn't. And what we've seen is that states that have the death penalty actually have, on average, higher murder rates than states that don't. Exactly the opposite of what you would expect. It turns out that the death penalty has no measurable contribution whatsoever to issues of public safety.
There are also reasons when we're thinking about the consequences for victims' family members that it doesn't make sense to have the death penalty. In most cases, death penalty litigation is incredibly protracted and takes substantially longer period of time than if life without parole is on the table. And that's very time-consuming and emotionally straining, I believe, for victims' family members who have to sit through hearing after hearing over sometimes decades, having to relive the experience of losing somebody in such a painful way, having to have the glare of the media attention on them every time there's a new advancement in the defendant's criminal case. And I think that can be very difficult to achieve any sort of closure on the part of a victim family member when they're having to wait that long for any sort of justice in their case.
The families of victims want justice. I think they're told that justice equals an execution. I think we can do better than that. We as a society, whether it's morally or religiously or a matter of personal conviction, whatever it might be, I think we can do things better than saying we're going to kill someone.
When we know that there are problems in the criminal justice system, it's very difficult to have a punishment out there that is the ultimate punishment that cannot be undone. And the alternative, putting somebody in prison for life without the possibility of parole, really does achieve all the things that we hope to achieve in terms of bringing somebody to justice, without the immense cost, without the immense suffering on the part of the victim's family members.
Conservatives believe in the principle of protecting innocent life, but innocent lives are being executed. Conservatives believe in limited government, but there is nothing limited about the government stepping into a person's life so much that it terminates that life. Conservatives believe in fairness, but when case after case shows that the death penalty is the product of arbitrary factors or misconduct or discrimination, that goes against that principle of fairness. And conservatives believe that a policy ought to be cost efficient, cost effective, and work. But the death penalty doesn't make us safer, doesn't serve as a deterrent. People actually aren't executed in substantial numbers, and it re-victimizes the family members who've already gone through the worst trauma anyone can imagine. When conservatives rethink the death penalty, and they look at all those key factors, more and more are saying, this is not something that I can support.
It's important to rethink the death penalty, not only based on the statistics that are out there, but really looking at the possibility that it could happen to you. So many of these folks who have come off death row, who have been exonerated from crimes that they didn't commit, are just people who are in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I think it's really important for people to understand that that's the kind of people that go to prison wrongfully, and that it can be anybody.
I don't view it any different than murder. How do you absolutely know?
Will the death penalty still be an option in Utah?
Utah senators have voted to end the death penalty in Utah.
They say it takes too long and it costs just way too much.
The question lawmakers are considering, should we even have it at all?
The bill's sponsor believes that the death penalty does not work, saying it costs too much money and turns death row inmates into rock stars.